Do you think that the corporate world needs to be reformed at a fundamental level?
The only thing is needed is opening the eyes of many of the leaders. They have it in their hearts. Many companies are much more heart focused than they were before. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put the script aside, and I'm just going to tell them my story.
Triggers are so many that pausing should be done very consciously, so many times with the help of a coach.
The emotions came up again, and I started to cry, and I was like, oh no. This is the end of my career. I started to cry in the CEO's office. This is so bad. I would think about it. I would never bring it up because I thought it was not corporate. I need to focus on results. But I think that drive from those kind of comments kept me going for a long time. Not anymore. In the beginning of my career, that was really coming from wanting to prove myself. Take care of yourself. Too many people that I've been coaching recently that are really not taking care of themselves.
Executive and the corporate world in Cyprus, a lot of them are ready to absorb this peace, love and high performance concept. When could we run the retreat together in Cyprus?
So whenever you want, I'm ready.
Karel, become the leader you want to follow. That is your company motto, and I believe might be one of your best personal motto as well. Why is that important to you?
Yeah, I mean, the best person you can look at for is yourself, right? If you're becoming the leader that you want to follow, then that's all you want to be. If I look at some of the leaders that I followed in my career that inspired me. When I thought about these people, I thought, what do they have, right? And there's always a few things that you can come up with. And then I thought, wow, when I was thinking about it and my purpose and what I wanted to do, and I thought, wow, if I can have those things, then I'm actually the leader that I would like to follow. Wouldn't that be great? So that's how I came up with that statement of becoming the leader you want to follow.
Looking back at your early career, would you say that it was a presence of a great leader or the absence of one that influenced your thinking about leadership today?
Early on in my career, it was actually the presence of. There's a few people that come to mind when I think about that. So people that really inspired me and helped me making some changes in my life as well, in my thinking. So no, it's definitely some. I mean, there's obviously a few examples of maybe not so great leaders that I wouldn't want to follow anymore, but I definitely have a lot of them that inspired me a lot. I can give you one example if you want it. There's one leader. When I just came out of school, I was working in a factory because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Right, I was a singer in a band, and I had no clue. And I started to work in the factory for a while, and I kind of like, well, it's okay. I'll make some money. You can buy a new guitar, right? So that was all I was thinking about. And then this leader, one of the managers of the factory, he pulled me aside and he called me into his office. And he said, Karel, you have much more potential than working in the factory. And then he started to paint a picture of what my life would look like when I was like 60. And I remember I was like 19 or 20, 18 or 19 at the time. And he said, that's what your life will be. Is that what you want? And he really helped me in like creating that vision of what it would look like and what the possibilities were. So for me, that was one of the first leaders that I worked with that I thought, wow, he really helped me to see life from a totally different perspective. And obviously left the factory after that and went to study. But that was one of the earliest examples of people that come in my mind when I think about a leader I want to follow.
That's great because sometimes real leadership comes from, creating the potential for the others to grow, even if you're risking losing them from producing you, whatever they are producing you, talking about business. What do you think in the corporate world today? What defines a great leader? A leader that someone truly wants to follow? Are there any specific characteristics or a common trait that you see that people want to follow that specific type of leader?
Yeah, what I'm seeing, it's more the humanistic, is it the right word? The human leader, right? So someone who's much more involved in a bit what I was describing with that leader. That just, he was really thinking about what was important for me at the time. But you see a lot of people would like to work with someone that that helps them grow, right? Who's more human, who's can also be a bit vulnerable. And I think it's also really, I mean, the buzzword adaptive leadership, right? You have to adapt to all the different things that are happening. And the only way to do that is if you really work with your team and you use all the strength of your team. So you need leaders who are vulnerable enough and courageous enough to do that. And leaders who don't feel that they have to know everything, but then can really leverage the diversity of their teams. That's what I've been seeing. And there's a lot of like, the new generations, they want that, right? They want more than just hard work. They don't want to see a leader anymore who comes to the office at 7 in the morning and works until 10 and does nothing else but work. That's not their role model anymore. They want to also have a life. And that vulnerability, that emotional connection is more and more important.
What does it take to demonstrate vulnerability? Especially if you are a seasoned leader, you have
Mm.
you carry some great achievements on your back, but at the same time, you need to be vulnerable and show that I don't know at some cases, or you might know
Mm.
better, or even I've failed doing
Yeah,
something. That's
yeah.
a big, challenge. Is that big challenge from what you see on leadership? Do they easily demonstrate this kind of vulnerability?
Some people do, some people don't, right? But I think that's what makes a really amazing leader when people can do. I mean, you cannot be a leader and every day you say, "I failed, I did it wrong," right? There must be a lot of things you do right. But yes, when there's things that didn't go well, or you just don't know the answer yet, or you ask for input from your team, that makes you vulnerable to the team, right? And it's also a bit cultural, because in some cultures it's very difficult to do that, to ask for input. Um, I remember that in the Netherlands, where I'm originally from, most leaders will ask for input, and everyone in the team will give input, right? It's very pretty open culture. Then many years ago, I moved to Belgium, and the culture there was completely different, although it's very close to each other. But if I would ask for input, I don't know if it was the company. I think it's also a bit the country culture. But when I was asking for input, they were like, "Why are you asking me for input? You're the boss. I mean, you need to know the answer, right?" And you saw that a lot. Also, I still see that a lot in Asian cultures as well. But I do see that's changing. There's change there. The newer generation doesn't do that anymore. They do want to be involved and want to have a say in things.
So what you're saying is that there is a difference um, in the leadership style that you follow consciously or unconsciously
Hmm.
because of the culture that you're coming from. So if you're coming from a more Western culture, probably you have developed some specific traits of leadership. But if
Mm.
you're coming from a more Asian culture, then the traits of leadership that you have developed might be very different.
Yeah, I was actually running a workshop last week where a lot of people from Japan and China were there, and they said, "Yeah, the way it worked when we grew up, we first needed to listen to our parents, then we had to listen to our teacher, then we had to listen to our boss, and they tell us what to do, right? And they don't argue with that." And again, they indicated that's changing a lot now. The generation now, they want to have an opinion, or they do have an opinion, and they want to share that opinion. But that took a long time, and it's still it's still not common or mainstream in Asia. It's still something that is growing slowly, but takes some time to further develop.
Let's talk. I really want to talk about transitions.
Mm.
You've had several in your life.
Yeah.
You you transition from the music industry to a more corporate world, and I will
Mm.
say much less creative one. And I'm
Hmm.
referring to audit and finance, where you stayed for many years.
Yeah.
You lived and worked in about 7 countries, and I believe across 3 continents.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you also transition from working at the top levels of large corporations,
Mm.
and I mainly refer to your role as a partner at Deloitte, to founding your own boutique coaching and training company,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
That's a lot
yeah,
of
correct.
transition, big one.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that for me, but sometimes when I read back, then I think, oh, yeah, a lot happened.
Oh,
Yeah,
was that my life?
yeah.
Uh, what has really helped you getting through this transition? Was it a specific skill, a mindset, or anything else that has particularly helped you?
I think it is curiosity is one that's important. I'm always very curious about other people, other cultures. How do things work in another setting? So I always was curious. So that was an important one. And then I guess being open for that, open for other opinions, other perspectives. Yeah, and just learning to go with the flow a little bit is something that took a little bit of more time, to be honest. But going with the flow and really accepting life as it comes is something that is something I learned along the way. And actually, that's something that I try to bring into my coaching and many things I do a lot to the acceptance part and yeah, be grateful for what you have and not look back as things could have been this or things could have been that. That's not relevant because yeah, I'm here now. But the first two are the most important: curiosity and being open to different perspectives.
If you consider that having carrying experiences and
Mhm.
successes on your back, that gives you also the confidence that you either know the answers or you know the right solutions. How could a leader, an experienced leader,
Mm.
being open on other perspectives and have that mindset that you have just described?
How can they do that? I don't know. That's a difficult question because it's something that is kind of like in your DNA, right? I mean, it's something you can probably learn a lot. I actually did a training 2 weeks ago where curiosity and diversity were different topics. It's sometimes being so. What I do in my retreats, and for instance, I bring in a lot of different people from artists, someone who's a painter, someone who's a photographer, a chef, all with different stories. And if you hear all these different stories and then try to think about how does that resonate or how does it link into what I'm doing and what I would like to do in my life, it sometimes just opens up your mind. So I I think through the music that I started with and creativity that helped me also to be much more open and more curious about things because that creative mindset really helps in yeah, and always looking for new things, right, and being open for that. But I think the different perspectives and just being exposed to that helps a lot in opening people's minds. But there's a big bias in many that we all have, right? It's so hard to get rid of that. Mm.
Tell me about it. Um, you, you've worked with a number of executives, and you also had the same time you had your own personal experiences moving from the different sectors, countries, and doing all these type of
Mm.
transitions, yeah, that you've achieved. What
Yeah.
do you think is the most common obstacle that hinders or slows down leaders from making transitions, which nowadays they've been asked to do a lot of transitions?
Um, I think mostly fear, right? If I look at my own, I had my portion of fear. I think I stayed in certain roles maybe a bit too long because I was afraid to make a move. Um, Thinking I know this company, I know the network, I'm very embedded in it. I make some good money. Maybe next year or maybe the year after, but let's first stay a little bit more. And it took me some time to really step up and create my own company, for example. That took time, and the main reason was fear. I just didn't have the guts to do it, and I see that a lot with people that I coach when then they tell me they first talk about their vision and their dreams and what they would like, and then well, then obviously the question that you normally ask as a coach is, okay, why in 10 years and not now, right? And then many of them say, no, but I first want to have whatever, $2 million in the bank, and when I have that, then I stop. And then I coach them, and a few years later, I meet them again. Then they have 2 million. Time to stop now. No, I think I need 3 million in the bank, and that goes on and on and on and on, and they never stop because they never feel they have enough, and they're always a little bit afraid that when they stop, then that everything will collapse and there's nothing there for them anymore. And creating that belief or that trust is very difficult for many people if you're so in your comfort zone, right, and doing what you've always done. So fear of stepping out of that comfort zone is the main reason from my perspective. Yeah.
How did you manage to get out of your comfort zone and get through your fear and creating your own company, which was one of your transition? Was that a particular, insight or kind of
Mm.
enlightenment that you had and get you through out of that fear?
Mm. I think yeah, there was one personal thing. So like 12, 13 years ago, I was on a leadership development, with a leadership course together with a few other people in Tibet. And we were traveling through the mountains, and I met this. I was in a monastery 5,000 meter high up in the mountains, and there was this, not a monk, but someone who was taking care of the monastery. And I was not talking, but at least with hand gesturing and whatever, communicating with him. And he lived in this really small place. He had this little room with a bed and a stove and some clothes, and that was it. But he had this smile on his face that I thought, wow, I want that smile. I want to wake up in the morning and have that smile on my face. I don't need all the stuff anymore. So I went back to the Netherlands, and then my ex-wife, yeah, she was not too happy with that, so she didn't really like that. So we got divorced at the time, and when you divorced, then half of the assets went to her, but then I used the other half of my assets to pay for the alimony, basically. So I was bankrupt about 13 years ago, and it felt amazing because I didn't have to worry about any money anymore because I didn't have any. And I went to instead of buying like the $500 designer jeans that I did the year before, I went to the secondhand market, and I was so happy when I found the $2 jeans that fit me and I liked as well. So I started to realize during that period that I really don't need that much. I can be really happy with only very little, as long as I can see my children, see my friends, my family, and have the basic things that I need. Then I can be very, very happy. So with that knowledge and with experiencing that made it much easier. It still took me a little bit of time, but it made it much easier for me to then transition into something that I really wanted to do, and that was setting up my own company.
Wow. I'm wondering, how was your leadership style evolved through your career, and especially after going to Tibet and go through this journey
Mm.
of personal discovery and making these great changes, being bankrupt, and
Mm.
how your leadership style has evolved throughout?
Yeah, I think if I look at the earlier part of my career, I was much more. Um, I think I've always been more of a people manager, if you can call people leader. I don't know how you want to call that, but focused on people leadership. But it became more and more, during my career. And I think if I look back, the first maybe 20 years, I was really focused on results. Getting more. Creating more money, buying a bigger house, buying faster cars, and with that also having a very high result focus. So also for the people I worked with, I was always focused on getting to that next result, right, and help people in their career in a way that I thought the only way to do that is to grow in your career and to make it to the next level. The more I started to go through my career, I started to realize it's not only the going up, it's really also growing and developing yourself as a person. So I think that aspect has come much more into my leadership style in the last years than it was in the beginning of my career. Um, yeah, and definitely now in my coaching, it comes back a lot because what I do feel is that many executives that I coach, and I recognize it a lot from my own experience, is that when you go through your they go through their career, and then when they're around maybe 40 years old or a little bit before that, you always, when you're good, you get new roles, and you just make you go with the flow basically, but in the flow that people tell you what to do that you're good at. But then there comes a certain point where you think, is this really what I want? And then you have to start thinking, and what I'm really enjoying doing now is supporting people in that phase of their life to think about, what is it actually that I really want? And also helping them realize that doing what you really want is not selfish at all, right? People initially a lot of times say, well, it's very selfish, right? It's not selfish at all, because when you do what you want at your company, you have the most value for your company, right? If you do something you don't like, you're probably not the highest performer in your company. And I really like that part too. And I started to do that already within the corporate environment as well before I started my own company. But that's something that developed over time.
Mm. Hearing you saying this and describing your journey and saying that, it was a time that you were focused on going up and growing on the
Mm.
career ladder of the company, which is one, I think, of the mindset that are being heavily developed on,
Mhm.
especially the large corporations globally,
Mhm.
which I think it's changing now, but let's keep
Mm.
it that's for later to discuss.
Yeah.
So an analogy came into my mind of, it's like having a tree that is growing and getting
Mm.
higher and higher, but its branches don't go
Mm.
that's
Right. Yeah.
all yeah. So if that tree managed to grow up branches that will
Mhm.
be more rich and will
Mm.
look more nice and cool,
Yeah.
accommodate more people under its branches.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that if you want to go into that metaphor, I mean, it's the view, the bigger view, the wider perspectives. But there also, you need to have the roots below, right? Because if there's only one root going in, the result root, then there's a bit of wind and the whole thing will collapse. And it's really creating all of these different elements. And I think that's what, yeah, probably what also, but a lot of, I think the roots and the foundation is also the purpose that, the vision for your own life that you have. And what I'm noticing is that many younger people already have that very early on these days. But still, many executives that I work with, they never thought about that question. And for me, it also took a long time before I ever started to think about that question. And I also don't want to think that everyone needs to have a bigger purpose, right? Because that then is really frustrating and stressful if you can't think of your purpose. But it's just thinking about what is it that I really enjoy doing, and sometimes you try things and it doesn't work. You try something else, but being open to that and finding the things that you really like, I think, is really important to build those roots and that foundation for being able to have a broader perspective.
What else other than purpose and enjoying what you do is important to grow up strong roots
Mm.
especially in the corporate world as we know it today.
Yeah, absolutely. The purpose. There's always a story I tell, and I might have told you this one before, but there was one executive I worked with, and he was in a healthcare company, and I met him. I didn't know him very well at the time, but I met him in a coffee shop one morning, and he was a bit stressed, like he was really irritated. And I asked him, "Hey, what's happening?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm very stressed. I'm not meeting my numbers. Shareholders are not happy, and all the internal politics." And I said to him, well, being like just did my coaching training at the time. So, well, with all your background and the age that you're at and your resume, it should be easy for you to find something that you really enjoy, right? And he said, "Yeah, I don't want to go there." He said, "Because what I'm now describing to you," said, "is like 25% of my time. It's maybe a small portion, but 75% of my time, I'm really living my purpose." And I asked him, I said, "Well, what is your purpose?" He said, "Well," he said, "5 years ago," he said, "I was diagnosed with cancer and I completely recuperated from it." And then he said, "And I realized that many people are not as fortunate as I am that they have access to this kind of healthcare. So I want to do everything I can in my life to bring healthcare to the millions of people who don't have access to healthcare." And that was such a strong purpose, right? I mean, and then, I brought that to my own team and we started to really work with that purpose statement. But that created such a different, like, it's not about money anymore, right? When you do your job well, then of course there will be money that you make with it, but it's really about a bigger purpose. And I love that because that foundation is so strong because then nothing can really, blow the tree over, right? Because you know why you're going through all the hard work that you're doing.
Karel, we live in a contradictory world, and I will explain what I mean. On one
Mhm.
hand, we have an immersive access to information to help us increase our awareness on many things, and so we can develop and work on things. On the other hand, we are experiencing the great resignation, the silent resignation. We've seen an increase levels of anxiety and burnout.
Mm.
What do you think is the problem? What are we missing? I still hoping to find an answer on that.
I think it goes a little bit to um, just inner peace, right? And I think I I'm reading a lot about. I've been reading for many years a lot about Buddhism, spirituality. I think that's a journey I've been on since about 20 years or so. And just having that groundedness and that inner peace, I think, is so important. And many people miss that. And that in the coaching that I do, I initially when I started, I was like, yeah, I cannot talk about, let's say, meditation or inner peace or these things, right? It's not corporate. People won't like it. But then I was coaching people, and there were so many that are, yeah, just as you described, very anxious, right? There's too much information, too much happening, geopolitical situations, economies that are not going as well as it should be, and everything at the same time. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put it aside, my own perception of what is good and what is not good for, and I'm going to try it out. So I did something called heart focused breathing, which is a technique that I use. Um, that I'm now bringing into my coaching sessions. And it's really working very, very well. People are really responding to it because many of them say, wow, and it's like 4 minutes, right? It's not even sitting for an hour of meditation. It's like 4 minutes. And they're like, oh, wow, this is the most peaceful I have felt in years. I haven't felt this for a long, long, long time. And the only thing you do in heart focused breathing is bringing your attention from your brain to your heart, basically. And but it's amazing what the impact is of that. So yeah, to go back to your question, I think that inner peace and just being completely aligned with yourself is a really really big part of it. We have too many things that are coming from all angles. The perceptions that people have of us and what the people think of us, and the social media and the LinkedIn and all the other things that are happening that are sometimes difficult for people to be grounded and be completely with themselves and at peace.
You took a very interesting perspective on Buddhism and teachings that coming up from Buddhism. Is there any other teaching that you believe that is what leaders should do today? I mean, considering what Buddhism has been teaching for I don't know how many
Mm,
years before we knew about
yeah,
leadership styles and whatever
yeah.
we discussed today.
I think there's many lessons we can learn from Buddhism, or yeah, there's other, but it's really all about the middle way is important, right? So not having extremes, and I think we're living in a world of extremes at the moment, where it's all, and also the like the enough is enough part, right? You don't need more and more and more. Like we're always in growth mode. When people prepare the budget or the forecast or or the planning for next year, they're always asked, take last year and put whatever 20% on it, and if it's less, then it's not good, right? It always needs to grow, 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 grow. What we can learn from the teachings is that you don't have to, that you don't need that, right? You can be grateful with what you have. So if you just look at what you have today, you can be grateful for that. You don't need more, 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 and more. And that's also the reason, I guess, why climate change is happening and all these things are happening, because we all want more all the time. Yeah, the Earth just cannot cope with all of that anymore. So there's many lessons we can learn. Yeah, and put in something like contentment, right? There should actually be a chief contentment officer, I guess, in in companies where it's just enough. You don't need more, right? We don't need to grow more than what we. The other thing is the fact that we're all like being all connected, right? That everything in this world is connected, and so instead of what I never like in corporate speak is always how we use all the fighting things like choose your war, and we have to kill our competition, and it's so not aligned with what nature brings us, right? So there's obviously there's a certain tension, but there's a lot more we can do together to solve all the big problems that we currently have in the world, and also seize the opportunities that we have.
Do you think that the corporate world needs to be reformed at a fundamental level to solve all these problems?
I think actually many. I don't think there's much needed. The only thing is needed is opening the eyes of many of the leaders. They have it in their hearts. So I cannot imagine that. I think most leaders know exactly what is needed, right? But it's almost the fight of your old, what do you call that? The old, like reptile brain against the more sophisticated part of your brain. Like, the old brain is still fighting for survival and for replication and more and more and more, right? But the more developed brain knows what's happening and how we can solve these problems. It can be much more focused on doing things from the heart. And yeah, so I think once we start to connect those parts, connect the heart to more what we're doing, I think we could be very close. And I think there's a lot happening in that area. So it's not all doom. I think there's a lot happening. Many companies are much more heart focused than they were before. The love was kind of like something you would not never say in a corporate environment. The word love is not used anywhere, but you see it come back more and more. Compassionate leadership and empathy and all these things are popping up everywhere in leadership programs and discussions with leaders around the world.
Do you think that there is enough empathy and compassion in the corporate world? And I mean an authentic one.
Enough, I guess not yet, but I think there's still a lot of room for growth there. Again, because it's something fairly recent that people started to really focus on that. If I look at my own journey again, until I was about 40, I never spoke about those things. Even if I, would think about it, I would never bring it up because I thought it was not corporate. I need to focus on results, right? And I never connected those things to a corporate environment. When I went on a sabbatical, I worked in India for about a year with blind and disabled people to help them set up their own companies and their own NGOs. And um, and then when I came back, I was so, that had such an impact on me that I needed to talk about it. I could not keep it to myself. So I started to talk about it to my colleagues at the time. And the amazing thing was when I opened up and started to talk about it, I had so many people coming up with similar stories. Oh, I'm working with this orphanage in Nepal and I'm doing this and I'm doing, but no one ever spoke about it. And so I think there's a lot of amazing things happening in different companies that people do individually, but it's not connected yet. It's not, people don't feel that it's part of the corporate world yet. But I think, again, that's changing. But yeah, there's so many beautiful things happening. And once we start to bring that to the surface, then I think there's a totally different way of leading and a totally different corporate environment. But there's room for growth there still.
What would you advise companies or their leaders to do to bring more of that empathy and compassion, even bringing up the discussions on that or whatever else they need to do to bring that up,
Mm.
to especially to the youngest generations and the people that are don't feel confident enough to
Mm.
speak about this?
What you said in the beginning might be the leader you want to follow, right? If you give the example, yeah, then many beautiful things can happen. I remember to give you one other example, if that's okay.
Of course.
When I went to Tibet, I I went to a monastery, and this is a very personal thing, but I went to a monastery there, and my father passed away like a few months before that. And I went into that monastery, and for some reason, I just started to cry. I couldn't stop crying. It was really, the energy there was really, really intense. And then I came back in the Netherlands, and the CEO I worked with at the time, he said, "Oh, yeah, you've been to Tibet," because he was the one that said that would be good for me to go to on that journey. And he said, "Do you have some pictures?" So I brought my iPad at the time, and I took him through a few pictures, and I gave him some background, and then I came to a picture of the temple, and I started to talk about it, but then the emotions came up again, and I started to cry, and I was like, "Oh no, this is the end of my career." I started to cry in the CEO's office. This is so bad, right? So yeah, got my emotions together and then discussed, and I kind of like ignored it as if it never happened. But then he called me in the evening. He said, "Karel," he said, I just wanted to share with you that I'm very, very impressed with how you are able to share your emotions, and that I really enjoy working with people who are vulnerable enough to show their emotions." And yeah, we had an amazing working relationship after that. That was completely changed. And it's not that I now invite everyone to start crying in the office of the CEO. That doesn't always help. But in this case, it had a big impact on the way I worked with him. But I felt this is the end of my career. This is just going to end here now. But yeah, I saw that. I experienced that actually showing your emotions sometimes, yeah, is not a bad thing at all.
May I ask what hierarchical level you've been at that time? You've been a partner at.
I was a like junior partner at the time. Yeah,
Okay, so you had
yeah,
there was a junior partner crying on the CEO office.
yeah, yeah. That's
That's
a good description. Yeah, it's a good book
yeah.
title. Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's a great experience, and thank you for sharing this personal
Mm.
story.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
I think this has to do a lot with what you mentioned before about biases and stereotyping, and especially in some of the Western cultures, there is a stereotyping of men that should not cry, and this is
Mm.
a womanish behavior, and which is not accepted on the
Mm.
uh, corporate world. And thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that, and
Mm.
that because this is so important for all the young executives or even women,
Mm.
not only men, to that
Yeah.
expressing our emotions is part of who we are, and that
Yeah.
if we didn't have to have that emotion, we wouldn't have it on our mechanism, and it's there, and we still need to
Yeah.
use that mechanism to express our emotions.
No problem. And I think it's also so important to just check in with the people you work with about how they are feeling. And that's something that also I don't know from the beginning of my career. That I think that came a little bit later, where that started. But just asking how someone is feeling was not something. Yeah, you've asked it, but more without expecting an answer, right? So it's more like, "Ah, good," but not really to go have any other further discussions. But it's really important because it's the same as what they always describe it, like emotions, like an inflatable beach ball, right? If you press it underwater, you try to hold it under the water. It's really difficult, and it will pop up at one time. But it's the same with your emotions. And it's better to express them than to let them pop up like that and come up in really weird ways.
Yeah, and probably when it pop ups, it will hit your face. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Karel, finding your leadership breath, your book.
Hmm.
To be honest, I haven't yet delved into every page, but from what I've
Hmm.
read so far, it's an inspiring book because you share your journey and your personal stories.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you also give a practical guide and steps for those that read it to realize what they truly want and how to go
Hmm.
after it to create
Hmm.
the desired life.
Yeah.
And reading that, a question came up to my mind that I would like you to share your
Hmm.
insight and especially your personal experience. When was a time that you find your leadership rhythm? Was that a particular
Um,
time or an event that helped you realize that, I now
mm,
need to find my leadership rhythm, or this is my leadership
mm.
rhythm?
I remember one time where I don't know if it's called my leadership rhythm, but there was one moment in my career that had a big impact. Um, I was actually I needed to do a presentation for a group of senior managers. I was a partner at the time, and typically, what would happen, you would get like a script, from whatever department, and things that you needed to go through and the different elements. And I was driving there, and I was just after a training that I did where I was introduced. It was also a bit of a turning point in my life, where I was introduced to more meditation and more spirituality, right? And I was driving to that session, and I was like, what do I want to tell them? So because I had that script, and then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put the script aside, and I'm just going to tell them my story. And uh, and I did that. So I told them my story, and I also spoke a little bit about the fact that I was introduced to meditation, how stupid I thought it was in the beginning, but that it really changed a lot for me. That it's really helping me, and just also a few personal things. And and I remember that after that session, many of the senior managers came to me and they said, "Oh, it was so amazing to finally see the human behind the partner." And then I realized, wow, that's so sad, actually, right? That we're always trying to put on kind of a mask and be someone in a specific role. And so that was a big change for me in how I then interacted with people after that going forward, being much more authentic and more myself. Yeah, so that was a
Mm,
big moment in that.
that's interesting. And I believe that the current time that we live, with the prevailing social media and there's so many filters that can be done through this,
Mm,
a lot of people can fake or can put mask and
yeah,
intentionally or unintentionally could do that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that makes it challenging for themselves and others as well.
Mm. If you think about, I like what you said about themselves, right? Because it's so difficult like when you put on a mask, you're basically playing a role. You're being an actor. And an actor, it takes a lot of energy, right? And so just thinking that we can be actors and keep a role up for a full day, that's never going to happen, right? You cannot do that. So it takes so much energy. So it's not surprising that there's so much anxiety and the resilience is so low because energy just drains out of you when you're trying to play a role all the time. And that's what I see many people, and I did that as well, but I see many people doing.
Do you think that it's easy for people to take out this mask, especially in having that filters that I mentioned before? And it's a kind of, if I can say, an informal need or request that you need to be under a formal style or certain behaviors to act, especially in the corporate world. How could someone get out the mask from his or her face and act and
Mm.
being the human that really
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not easy for many of us, right? Because there's a certain way of how things are done in many companies, and you try to, and there's nothing wrong to try to adjust to the environment that you're in. But I think as leaders, what we can do is we can set the example of taking off your own mask and showing that you're human. And if you show that you're human, then obviously the people that follow you will be inspired to also show the same thing to you. So I think as leaders, there's a big role that we need to play to make sure that people feel safe enough to do that. But without that, it's really difficult, right? For many people.
You also run, I would say, a groundbreaking retreat for season executives, which is called Peace, Love, and High Performance.
Mm,
How
yeah.
would these three elements, peace, love, and high performance, come together?
Yeah, it's a bit what I found in my own journeys, right? That many times what you see is that companies start with high performance. They start to focus on KPIs, on balanced scorecards, and P&Ls, but they forget the part that we were just discussing, more the human part of it. So the way I looked at it
That
was
is a
like,
trick,
if
right?
yeah, yeah, and but the way I looked at it is like, well, actually, if you want to really create high performance, it needs to come. It needs to start with people that are completely at peace, like who have inner peace, who are strong inside, and who also radiate that. I mean, if you look at leaders, when I ask people about what are some of the things that you see in leaders that really inspire you, it's always like, well, they're very composed, they're calm. Even when things are blowing up around them, they still remain calm. That's something that they really. So that peace inside is really, really important. So what I do in the retreats is I first focus on that part, and then and when you have that peace inside, then it's thinking about, okay, what, the self-love, knowing yourself. Who am I? What do I want? Those are important things. And when you know that, then you can go to high performance. Then you can say, okay, what is the action plan then that I need? What's the steps that I need to take? And there's an individual part to it, but there's also, in the model that I use, like a more team part to it, where, as team, we need to have that inner peace. We need to have the psychological safety in the team to be open and to listen to diverse perspectives. We need to have the love, which means collaborating with each other. How do we resolve conflicts? And then again, we can go to the high performance part. But many times when I talk about this concept with people, they're like, what does it have to do with high performance? Peace and love. It's so contradictory, but I think it's the foundation. Without that, maybe you can just start with high performance, but it will not be sustainable. And the fact that, and probably you will not really enjoy it either. But if you create that foundation, there's a lot more fun, and it's much more sustainable.
Sustainability of high performance is one of the outcomes that you've observed in leaders when they bring in harmony, peace, love, and high performance. What
Yeah.
else? What other outcomes have you observed in leaders that they have managed to bring these three elements together in harmony?
Well, one, it's just more fun, right? Just more enjoying the work more. If you're people that really, there was one person that I was coaching, and I used this model with him as well. And he was someone in Korea, and he said to me, Karel, he said after a few sessions, right? He said, something really strange happened to me. I was talking to one of my colleagues, and the colleague came to me and said, "Are you all right?" And then he said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Yeah, you're smiling, and you were never smiling before." He said it was so interesting. And he said, and the reason I'm smiling is, he said, I'm now really starting to enjoy what I'm doing. I know how it's now linked to what I want to achieve. And I found that more, the peaceful place from where to start. And the first session, he was just a lot of anxiety. He was very unhappy with his life. I was, sometimes do the life wheel or something like that to just get a bit of a feel for where they are. It was really, really miserable. And I'm not saying it's the silver bullet, but it really helped with him, at least, to create a lot more clarity on what he wanted, and then create a lot more joy in his life, and creating the high performance. And he also said, like, even my son, he never wanted to go with me to the gym, and now he wants to come with me to the gym. Like, there's a lot of things that then start to happen. Not only in the corporate, in his work, but also in his more private life.
So sometimes to get more clarity, we just need more peace or pausing to see more
Absolutely.
clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah, we never take a pause anymore,
Mm.
right? Because we're not used to that.
Yeah.
And if I look at my younger son, he's always the moment he's bored, he picks up his phone and he starts to scroll,
Mm.
right? But we don't take the time anymore to just leave that thing alone and just sit and just listen to your heart, basically.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the access that we have on technology, we are connected anytime, everywhere. We're on
Yeah,
so many social chats, team works online, offline. So it's the
yeah,
triggers are so many that
yeah,
pausing should be done very consciously, and
yeah.
especially with so many times with the help of a coach.
A few years ago, I did a Vipassana meditation for 10 days, where you meditate for 10, but then you have to give all your technology, right? You give your phone and computers and even books. You can't have anything, just yourself, basically, for 10 days. And but when I ended the 10, so you're not allowed to speak or have contact or communication also during the 10 days. But when I was done, they gave me my phone back, but I was like, keep it. I don't want it anymore. It was so peaceful. And it's so interesting because many people that were there had the same feeling, like, "No, I don't want that thing anymore. Just keep it. It's so peaceful just to be here and
It's all
enjoy the
yours.
environment."
Take it.
Yeah,
Take all the burden with
yeah,
that as well.
yeah,
10 days, amazing. I've just managed to do it for 2 days.
yeah. It's an amazing experience, but it's. I also started with first, like, 15 minutes per day or whatever, and then after some time I did that for 10 days, and it was the first 2 days were horrible. Then your mind is just going everywhere, but then the third day you become very focused, and yeah, there's a lot of answers in that stillness. And yeah, what you said, that stillness, there's a lot of wisdom there that we don't tap into anymore because we are so bombarded with information and technology all the time.
Can you think of any public figure from either from the corporate world, maybe from politics that might be a bit more challenging, or any other field, a leader who has successfully embodied all three elements: peace, love, and high performance? Can you recall any public figure?
Hard to just think about someone now like that. I didn't think about it too much, but I know that if you just think about the meditation part, right? If you just look at, which is obviously a small part, but there's many leaders, like I forgot his name now, the CEO for Salesforce. He always talks a lot about how meditation helps him in being much more clear, making much better decisions, being much more creative. So there's many leaders that at least take that step back to find that peace to get answers. There was actually a CEO in that 10 day Vipassana that I did who said the same thing after the 10 days we were done, and I had a discussion with him, and he said that he did that. He's doing it every year. So he said a few years ago he said I went to this Vipassana and I was so clear in my mind that I thought, wow, I wish everyone in my company had the same. So his whole leadership team, he's taking them on that Vipassana every year. He said it completely changed the way we interact with each other. We don't immediately react anymore. We think about a bigger purpose before we start reacting. And then everyone in his company, the whole globally, whoever wants to go, they don't have to take vacation days. They can do that once a year. He said it has a huge impact on the way we do business. So I can't think of a public figure, but those are some examples that came to mind when you asked that question.
Karel, when could we run the retreat together in Cyprus?
So whenever you want, I'm ready. All the material is here, so we can do it. Yeah.
So next year, that's a date.
Looking forward to it. Cyprus is my favorite island, so would love to go there again.
Looking forward. I would love to run this together. And I think the executive and the corporate world in Cyprus, I'm sure that knowing some of the executives here are ready, a lot of them are ready to absorb this peace, love, and high performance concept. Because sometimes it's not the right time for some of them.
Yeah.
So it's important
Correct.
to be ready to step into that. I'm sure that you would agree that there is an increasing evolution of coaching, either for executive coaching or team coaching in organizations.
Yep.
What are the most important things people or organization should look for when they're searching for a coach?
Yeah, obviously it's the personal click that is really important. What you also see is that you have to ask a bit of questions around what is the professional background of the coach, right? Yeah, does he or she have a coaching background? Because it's easy to call yourself a coach, right? Anyone can call themselves a coach. But it's really an art, right? Asking the right questions is an art that you have to learn. And what I've seen a lot is that it goes into like more mentoring very quickly instead of coaching. So I think the personal click is important. Just the experience that the coach has, like how long have they been coaching, what kind of coaching education do they have, is important. I'm never too worried about whether they have I mean, it always helps. Like I'm coaching many people in the professional services space because I have that background and makes it easier. But it could also hinder myself sometimes a bit because then I feel I know what they are going through. And sometimes as a coach, it doesn't help at all because you want to be very objective and not attached to any of your own thinking. So it's really, the two things that I just mentioned, the experience that they have as a coach and, and the personal click with the coachee. And then
Mm.
and what I also found is that sometimes companies send people on like a coaching journey, if you want to call it that, but they don't really explain what it's for, right? And it's important also that the person being coached comes with some very clear, coaching objectives and is open to coaching. And that's sometimes also a bit the role of the coach to make sure that the people, that they open up when you go through the coaching and together determine what the objective is. But sometimes when people send people as part of a program, it could be a bit challenging. So also finding out is the person ready to be coached is an important part.
Yeah, I think the approach of sending someone to coaching is not really working. It's what
Mm,
you said, that people need to buy in to this process, and
yeah,
especially they need to be ready, and especially they need to understand what are the targets and
yeah.
how what I will gain out of that.
And the other thing that's important is that with your coach that you hire, you agree on what are the outcomes, right? What are we trying to achieve, so that it's not just. Otherwise, it could quickly go into just a general discussion about whatever is the topic of the day. But you're doing this for a reason. So what is the outcome? What is it that you want to achieve? And then also, what I typically do is, then I try to build kind of a stakeholder group around the person I'm coaching, so that more people know what if the coachee wants that, know what the topic is that we're discussing, can give some feedback, because then you also create that culture where people know what's happening and they can support that person in further developing or further leveraging something they are already really good at. But creating that environment, I think, is really important for the success of a coach.
Karel, what's your approach to self-care, considering that you are a coach that works with high-level executives?
Hmm.
I'm sure that you do have, as you've mentioned before, that you advised your customer to take care of their self-care in a most holistic approach, not only achieving targets. What is your
Mm.
personal approach? I mean, to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I have a pretty structured rhythm, I think, for that. So I exercise every day. So normally I get up early and I exercise.
What time do
Then
you
I
get up
meditate
early?
between 5 and 5:30, because then it's still doable to run, right? If I'm living in Hoi An in Vietnam, where it's like very hot. So if I get up too late, I just cannot run anymore. So 5:30 probably when I go running. Then I do an hour of meditation after I run. And I also try to have a bit of time in between coaching calls if I have coaching calls scheduled or meetings, and use that heart focused breathing that I spoke about almost before every call to make sure that I'm really there for people. Um,
Ground.
yeah. So it's really, and that meditation really really helped. That was for me a big change in my life when I started to do that. That's about 20 years ago.
Nice. I'm still trying
Yeah.
to be consistent on getting out at 5:30 to go out for my meditation. Um,
Hmm.
Karel, what's one piece of advice you will give to all those aspiring young executives that working hard to achieve results in the corporate world?
Take care of yourself. That's probably number one. There's too many people that I've been coaching recently that are really not taking care of themselves, and you can just see it happening, that they are racing towards a big wall, and some of them already did, and then they come for coaching. But it's like there's so much happening, as you described in the beginning. Like there's so much information, so many um, expectations from everyone, and then the expectations we put on ourselves through all the social media and all the things we see. And it's really really, the self-care is so important. And the finding your rhythm part. You really have to find your own rhythm in how you do things, and take off that mask. Be human. Be really you. That's the best thing. That it took me a long time to get there, but the moment I started to be myself, my life was so much different and so much more like high performance, if you want to call it that, compared to the period before that.
There is I have a particular interest of connecting dots, and as you said, that everything is connected. I'm always wondering what particular experiences from our early years have influenced who we are today, and I'm sure that all we have are those particular experiences. Is there any particular experience from your early years that have influenced you on who you are today and your journey? One that you can share at least?
Well, the one I shared is the one with that person in the factory, but there was also I remember in school. So as I indicated, when I was going in high school, I was in punk rock bands, right? So I didn't want to study that much. And I remember there was one teacher, and he told me, "Well, Karel, like, why don't you go, buy me cigarettes during the lesson, because there's no use for you being in the class. You will never learn anyway, right?" And I think he did it on purpose, because then I got really angry at myself, and I thought, I'm going to show that guy that I can learn, right? So I started to work really, really, really hard, and got really good grades on the topic he was teaching. So he did an amazing job in fooling me like that. But I think that drive from those kind of comments kept me going for a long time. Not anymore. I mean, that's not what I'm doing today. But I think in the beginning of my career, that was really coming from that space, wanting to prove myself a lot, and that wanting to prove myself. Luckily, when I was around 40, 45, when I went through that session when I also learned how to meditate, that started to change at that time. But that took time. Having the self-confidence, not to having to prove myself. Yeah.
Thinking about your teacher, I think no, there is no teacher that will dare today to send a student for buying
No.
buying them.
No, absolutely not. Will be
But
the end of
it
their
was a
career, I think.
that you said.
It worked very well for me, yeah, because I had high grades because of that. Yeah. But I wouldn't advise any teacher to follow that same
Yeah.
way.
I don't think that they will dare anyway.
No.
Is there anything else important that we missed to touch upon, Karel, during our discussion?
I think there's many other things we can talk about, but I think we covered a lot already in the hour that we spoke. Yeah.
Karel, I want to thank you for sharing your personal experiences, your journey to spirituality, to expressing our emotions, to what it takes to be a great leader. And I think that is particularly important for all the new aspiring leaders to hear, to influence them to take care of their self first, and then put the mask to all the other people that they need to take care of. So thank you for what you've shared with us. And actually, I'm looking forward to next year running the Peace, Love, and High Performance Retreat together here in Cyprus.
Looking forward, and thanks for having me. It's been a really good discussion. So thank you for having me on the podcast. And I'm also really looking forward to our session next year.
Thank you, Karel.